Structural balance training versus HIIT training, which is more important? I've had a question come through on one of my YouTube videos from one of our UMS online coaching tribe members, Amber. And she has said, I've been on this new UMS program for a few weeks now. It is structurally balanced driven, of course, but the new program does not have HIIT training anymore. How important is HIIT training along with your balance training for overall health and body transformation? And should I be doing HIIT training on my days off? Should I be doing HIIT training at all? It's a great question. And my answer is this: you can't ride two horses with one ass. So when you think about your training, we have to think about what the number one priority is for this training cycle, for this mesocycle. What are we trying to achieve? Because I think this is where a lot of people go wrong. A lot of people go to the gym and they just work out like for the sake of sort of turning over the wheels, like just getting something done, just going in, lifting weights, doing something, doing some HIIT, getting their heart rate up. And of course that's better than doing nothing. Of course it is. And of course it's going to keep you healthier and fitter than doing nothing. But for those of you that want to see consistent progress, if you want to see month on month that you're making progress towards whatever your big goals are. So you have your big rock goal. Maybe you want to lose 30 pounds of fat. Maybe you want to build 20 pounds of muscle. Maybe you want to get back to playing basketball or pickleball without shoulder pain from this slap tear that you've got. Maybe you want to be able to play tennis without your lower back pain, or whatever it is, whatever the reasons why you're training are. And every single program phase needs to bring you one step closer to that goal. So Amber, the program that I've given you is designed to get you closer towards your goals. And of course, we are, we've been working together for a while, so you know that every program phase we're sort of building on the last bit. So let's talk about HIIT training versus structural balance training and why we would do either. The whole reason why you would do HIIT training, high intensity interval training, is really for cardiovascular reasons. It's to build up endurance. So maybe it might not necessarily be for cardio, but it's to build up endurance, It's to get that heart rate up and to get you to be able to handle doing more of what it is that you're currently doing. Now, HIIT training is very good. It has its place. I virtually never do it, to be honest. And the reason why I virtually never do it is because it's not my goal. It's not my goal to be that fit. I do cardio training. I do fitness training. I keep myself at a level of cardio where I can keep up with someone. I'm not going to be able to go on. Like if I went to a CrossFit gym and did like a WOD, did like a HIIT workout, I'd be able to keep up with them. I can do it, but I certainly wouldn't be at the top of the board with anything. I'd be pretty good in any of the strength movements. But, when I have done workouts like that with my buddies that do it regularly, I keep up with them, but I'm always at the end just going, and dying, But it's just not my goal. It's not what I'm trying to achieve with my training. I'm trying to get as strong and flexible as possible and, maintain a lean physique, maintain good health. And so HIIT training just isn't something that I really do that much. Structural balance training, on the other hand, I believe that every single person in any part of their training should be doing some form of structural balance training. So even if you do HIIT training, then I would still highly recommend that at the end of your session, when you're totally cooked and you finish your HIIT workout, that you would do some form of, how do I describe this? So you would use structural balance training by, at the end of your training, doing some inner unit stabilization work. So, a typical HIIT workout that we would write for somebody, usually for body composition, usually for people that want to lose fat, would be a full body workout. So the best HIIT workouts, if you want to lose fat, are full body workouts. It's not optimal to do body part workouts like a push workout or an upper body workout or a lower body workout, for example. It's good to do the whole body if you want to do HIIT. And then at the end of that workout, we'd just do some, maybe on one day of the week, you'd do some step-ups for knee stabilization work and maybe some single leg deadlifts or other hip stabilization work. You can do lateral band walks with a band around your knees for glute activation, for things like that. Also core training, core is a part of structural balance training as well. And then on other days, you might do some rotator cuff work or some scapular stabilization work or things like that. So that's where some structural balance training would come into your HIIT training. But the reason why you've got more structural balance training right now is because of the way that we've assessed where you're wanting to go with your training. That is the best thing for you to be doing right now. Now, because most people don't have more than, let's say, 40 minutes or 60 minutes to work out, it's quite rare that I train with somebody that can train for more than 60 minutes in one workout. Some people can, but those are the minority. The majority of people are really restricted to being able to do like maybe a 60-minute workout. And so within that 60 minutes, we have to be very selective with what it is that we choose, that we include in that workout. Because if we just put a little bit of everything, if we put a little bit of HIIT and a little bit of this and a little bit of that, it just doesn't really move the needle forward far enough in any area. And to make progress, to maintain progress that you've made takes about 10% of the effort that it took you to get there. So a good way to understand that is, if you couldn't do any pull-ups at all and you worked really, really hard for a year or 2 years to be able to, let's say a year, because if you do the right kind of training, most people could get there in about a year. And now you can do 5 pull-ups and you can do 5 really good pull-ups. And your whole programming was built around doing pull-ups for that year. You know, you were doing 2 or 3 workouts a week that were very pull-up driven. You can actually maintain 90% of that strength in your pull-ups by only doing 10% of the volume. So what that would mean is, if you were doing 2 workouts a week of 5 sets of doing pull-ups, you could actually maintain 90% of that strength by only doing 1 set a week of pull-ups, as long as you were going to failure, to max effort. So think about that, because a lot of people misunderstand that the work that you're doing on an area is something that they're going to have to maintain for the rest of their life if they want to be able to maintain these results. For example, for me, there was a time where flexibility was my big rock, where I was really doing a lot of flexibility training. And, you know, I was really focused on getting the middle splits and getting back bridges and, you know, getting front splits, things like that. And then I got to a point where I was satisfied with my flexibility standard. I didn't have gymnastics level flexibility or, you know, elite dancer level flexibility. But, you know, for those of you that have been following me for a while, you've seen my videos, you've seen pictures of me. I had pretty impressive flexibility for the average person. And the point came where, for me to get that last 10% of flexibility, you know, like I never got the absolute 180 degree middle splits. I probably got to maybe 170 degrees, where when I was completely warmed up, my groin would have been like maybe that far off the ground. But to get that last little bit of flexibility, for starters, it's quite possible that I would never get it, because some people have a certain makeup in their femoral acetabular joint there. And it just restricts them from being able to go to that full range of motion. So there's that. So pushing will never achieve it. But then the other thing is, it's like, I said to myself, what's the value of getting that last 10 degrees of flexibility in the splits, for example? Like, what's it really going to do for me, besides being able to take a really cool picture, you know, for Instagram and social media, which I guess, you know, me being a fitness professional running an online business, maybe that does have value. But with the amount of work required to get that last little bit, I decided that it wasn't a great use of my time. And so I really scaled back my flexibility training, and I doubled down on my strength training. And any of you that have been following my workouts, you know, this year and following what I've been doing, I really doubled down on building muscle. And I built some good muscle. I put on close to 10 kilograms or 22 pounds of muscle, and I've maintained a pretty lean, you know, physique. I'm still about 11% body fat, I'd say. Maybe after this holiday, I'm 12% or 13%, but I'm still in pretty good shape. And so, but I've still maintained a very high level of flexibility. And when I think to myself, and I've done this a couple of times this year, where I'm just going to go a little bit harder on my flexibility now. I want to get a little bit more. It takes me about a month to get back to like 95% of my best effort. And even when I start that process, because I still always do some flexibility training, and I still do mobility training every day, which mobility training is a really good way to maintain your flexibility. Then, you know, so I've been able to maintain a really, really good result with that. And the reason I'm saying all of that is because you don't have to think of these things of like, oh, I have to be doing everything all at once or I'm going to lose it all. You won't. It's not how it works. And so what happens is we often shift the focus from different things. So Even Yanni and I, who have been, like, we always talk about, and this week I've been talking about structural balance training and talking about how everybody that joins the UMS online coaching, they always start with structural balance training, because structural balance training addresses issues that you didn't even know you had before they turn into injuries. That's a really important part of structural balance training. So it's basically preparing you for the much higher demands of training that are coming, that are very specific to your goals. So wanting to build muscle, I just had a message from Tommy, one of our long-time members at Unity Gym. He trained with us face-to-face at Unity Gym. Then he did our online coaching for about a year, and then he went and trained with another coach face-to-face. He wanted to get that face-to-face coaching where he did some hypertrophy training, and now he's come back to the UMS, and he's really doubling down on hypertrophy training. And he just messaged me about his first workout, and he was telling me, with his program, he really wants to really be, dialing in hypertrophy training. It's all about building his physique. And I wrote this program for him, and he was looking at it and he was going, has it got enough of this? Should I be doing a little bit more of that? And, to look at the program, he was thinking that it didn't really have enough of what he was, wanting to get from it. But we're doing supersets. And I said to him, Tommy, have you ever done supersets before? And he said, well, yeah, I have. And I said, yeah, I get it. A lot of people have done supersets, but a lot of people haven't done them properly. And if you do supersets properly, the idea of going to failure in one exercise and then resting less than 10 seconds and repeating another exercise on the same muscle group and going to failure again, if you put real intention in those muscles where you're not just thinking about moving the weight, you're thinking about keeping those specific muscles under contraction for the entire set, that will murder you. And then we're doing some supplementaries, doubling down supplementaries on the same muscle groups. I said, trust me, give the program a try. I'll be surprised if you can get this workout done in less than 90 minutes. He comes back to me the next day going, oh my God, that workout just kicked my ass. It was so good. And so, the reason why I'm sharing that story is because, when you have a program written for you by a coach that has a long-term perspective view on how we're going to get you to your goals, it might not include all the things that you think you should be doing. But if the coach knows what they're doing with progressive overload and periodization, then this program phase is setting you up for the next program phase and the next program phase. So it builds a level of strength and conditioning, or whatever the goal is with the program, that you're going to keep and that you will be able to maintain with a small amount of effort. So, the question again, what's more important, HIIT versus structural balance training? It depends on your goals, but I would say that in my opinion, I think structural balance training is more important for everyone to do at the start of their journey. It is so important. And it's also something that people like Yanni and I, who have been training now for, if I include my martial arts training, I've been training for 30 years. I started training properly when I was 17. I turned 47 next year, so 29 years. If I count my training that, is in the sort of style of training that I'm doing now, it's been more like 10 years, pursuing things like calisthenics and flexibility and the development of the UMS. And I still do structural balance training in every workout. So every single workout, when I design my workouts, I'm designing them with structural balance in mind. I'm designing them balancing pushing and pulling, balancing upper and lower body strength, balancing strength and flexibility, balancing left and right side symmetry. So always doing some unilateral work in my workouts with dumbbells. It's not all just calisthenics work like dips and pull-ups where it's a bilateral movement. Always doing and I'll do certain phases. Like for example, last year I got golfer's elbow and I didn't stop working out. I changed my programs to cater for the golfer's elbow. So I had to start doing neutral grip instead of a supinated grip or a pronated grip. I had to start doing a lot of forearm work, elbow work, wrist pronation and supination, wrist work, doing wrist flexion and extension, a lot of grip crushing, a lot of finger extension work. And I did that for several months and I fixed the golfer's elbow, and then I went back to doing other stuff. And then I'll do certain program phases where, because I've had a meniscus tear in my right knee, and I've also been diagnosed with patellofemoral syndrome after I had that really nasty injury, the fall that I had when I was in the army, when I was serving overseas as an infantry soldier. And so I've had program phases where I've started to feel a little bit of knee pain. So I program in some structural balance training for my knees and my hips again. And I'll do that for 2 or 3 months just to bring that strength up again. And then I'm pretty much always doing inner unit stabilization work for my shoulders because I've had slap tears and I'm always trying to make those shoulders better. So, you can't do everything at once. And every time that I've tried to do everything at once, every time I've tried to fit everything into one workout, man, the workouts take 2 hours or 2.5 hours, and you just can't maintain that long term. It just causes so much stress because you're fatigued all the time. You go into your workout feeling like just really overwhelmed because there's just so much work to do, and it creates this mentality where I feel like I've got to put other things in my life on hold to get my workouts done, and then other areas of my life suffer, and it's just not a great way to do it. And then back to your question, should I be doing HIIT training outside of the UMS? So yes and no. It depends on, I can't remember what your program split is, but I'm pretty sure I've got you on a pretty high volume program split. I'm pretty sure that you're doing 5 or 6 days a week of UMS training, which means there's not a lot of space for HIIT unless you're going to do some days of the week where you do double day training, or unless you're going to do HIIT at the end of your UMS workouts on some days of the week. And these things can be done, but rest and recovery must be taken into consideration for this. And guys, I can see on YouTube your comments. I'm going to answer your comments, your questions and your comments in just a minute. And hey, I'll take a moment to say this right now, really quickly. If you're watching this content and you're getting value out of it, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and like the video, because I put so much work into this stuff for you guys, into putting free content out there that I really hope is helping you guys with your fitness journey, with your strength and flexibility, motivating you, clearing up some of the confusion that's out there in the fitness industry. And the one thing that you can do in return for me is just subscribe to my channel. It really means a lot, and it goes a long way to telling the algorithm that this content is valuable. We get so many comments on our content saying, this is some of the best content I've ever seen. I cannot believe you don't have more subscribers and you're not getting higher views. And so you can help us with that by just simply hitting that subscribe button, hitting that like button on any of our videos that you see. Okay, so considerations for rest and recovery, doing, something like a UMS split, like what I've given you, Amber, and doing your HIIT training. So the way that training works, if you, the higher intensity that you train, the more recovery you need. And so there's multiple ways to do this. If you're going to train more days in a week, then each workout needs to be at a lower intensity. For example, most of this year, I've been doing 5 or 6 days a week of training. And when I say or 6, I have a workout programmed for Saturday, but I don't always get it done. I'm a dad. I've got a 7-year-old. He plays soccer on the weekends. I've got a wife who runs a business. She's a musician and she teaches a class on Saturday, which means I've got to take care of my son while she goes to do that. So Saturday is a workout where it's kind of like a bonus workout for me. It's like if everything's working out well and I can get it done, then I get it done. And if I can't, then that's okay. But I've gotten 5 workouts done most weeks this year. And so each of those workouts, the way it would work is Monday would be my highest intensity workout. And then each workout after that, the intensity would reduce just a little bit, because a big mistake people make is doing high intensity workouts one day after the other. It's a bad idea to follow a high intensity workout with a low intensity workout. So what you should do, if you are training 5 or 6 days a week, if you're training multiple days in a row, you should choose which day is the higher intensity day where you're really going for it. And then it should be followed by a lower intensity day, even if the body part that you're training is different. So even if you're doing upper body strength on Monday and you go high intensity, and then you're doing lower body strength on Tuesday, if you're training again on Wednesday, Tuesday's workout should still be at a lower intensity. Now my program that I'm doing and that I'm going to do over the Christmas break and leading into the new year, I'm doing wave loading, and wave loading is very high intensity. I made a reel or a short on social media on all of our channels earlier this week, where I was showing one of my workouts doing dips and pull-ups doing wave loading. And so wave loading, you're lifting, it's an overload technique. It's a more advanced overload technique that we introduce after people have done structural balance training, because you really do not want to do overload techniques if you have any niggling injuries, because the idea of an overload technique is to overload the body. It's to push you beyond your threshold. And if you've got any underlying issues, any injuries like that, that are sort of sitting there laying dormant, they are going to come out when you're doing an overload technique. So wave loading is where you do 6 sets and you do 5 reps in the first set, and then you increase the weight and do 3 reps in the second set, then you increase the weight and do 2 reps in the third set, and then you repeat that wave again doing 5, 3, 2, but increasing the weight even a little bit more than the first set. So it's very high demand. And so I'm doing that on my upper body on Monday, and then on my lower body on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday I'm having a recovery day, where on Wednesday all I do is handstands and mobility, and then I do again on Thursday upper body strength, Friday lower body strength, and then recovery again over the weekend. So I'm only doing 4 days a week where I'm doing these high intensity workouts, and it's all built around recovery. So it's built around where I do the same muscle group on Monday and Thursday. So that's a 72-hour rest window, which is the optimal time for recovery, but with a full rest day on Wednesday. So, you know, the way that you, like, the reason I'm saying that is because the intensity of your program your rest and recovery needs to align with the intensity of your program. So if we go back to adding HIIT training into your UMS workout program, these things have to be taken into consideration. So if you're going to be training 5 days a week, then I would recommend doing HIIT training no more than 2 days a week, maybe even just 1 day a week. And you would do it potentially, like there's so many different ways that you could do this, but you would potentially do it like this. I would probably do HIIT training on the lower body strength days, because a good HIIT workout is really going to hit the legs and hit the lower body, because, you know, when you're doing HIIT, I hope you're doing something like sprinting or burpees or box jumps or, shuttle runs or, the assault bike at the gym, or, it's going to be something that really gets the heart rate up, gets the cardio up. And for that, we're going to be using the lower body. So it would be good to do it on the leg day, on your leg training day, so that you're not, killing your lower body one day with HIIT workouts and then trying to do a squat day the next day. You could do it at the end of your UMS workout, because you would want, you can't produce maximal strength if you're already fatigued. So you would never do your HIIT training first and then go and do a strength workout. That's a recipe for disaster. You do your strength training first, and then you could finish with, anywhere from an 8 to 20 minute HIIT session. And I'll tell you more about that in a minute. Or you could do a double training day where you do your UMS workout in the morning, you do your strength training when you're fresh, and then you could do your HIIT training in the evening. Now, here's the cool thing about HIIT. The research shows that 8 minutes of HIIT training can actually burn the same amount of calories as 60 minutes of steady state cardio, like going for a jog or cycling or something like that. But the HIIT training needs to be balls to the wall. It needs to be so high intensity that at the end of those 8 minutes, you are like laying on the ground gasping for air, like you could not possibly push yourself any harder. So most people don't train that hard. So when I do HIIT training, I usually only do it for about 15 to 20 minutes, but man, do I go for it. Like I am gasping for air, and I do HIIT training here and there. When I usually do HIIT training, I do hill sprints. I love hill sprints because they're good for the knees. Running does have a high level of impact on the knees, and when you're doing hill sprints, you're always striking the ground with a bent knee, so that really takes a lot of the pressure off the knees. And I never run down the hill. I would never run downhill. The risk versus reward even if I'm going for a run, a steady state run, if I come to a downhill, I walk it. Because when you run down a hill, you're almost always striking the ground with a straight knee, and that's really, really bad for the knee. And if I do run down the hill, it's not a run, it's a very light jog, and I look really weird when I'm running down the hill because I land with bent knees. So take that into consideration as well. And I love hill sprints as well because they are so goddamn hard. And it's also good for my anterior pelvic tilt, for my spondylolisthesis, because what you can actually do when you're doing hill sprints, if you think of pulling yourself into a neutral pelvis, which is unnatural for me, I have to really engage my glutes for that. And I think about using my glutes when I'm doing those hill sprints. It's giving me good activation of the glutes, and it's helping to strengthen my pelvis, my hip stabilizers in a position that is relevant to life, that is, relevant to walking and moving and the gait movement pattern. So those are that's one consideration for doing HIIT training. And if you were going to do that, if you were going to do your HIIT training on any of those combinations that I talked about, then the next day of training you would want to be taking it easy, and you wouldn't want to do HIIT training with less than 72 hours rest between each session if you're also doing all your UMS training, because rest and recovery is so much more important than what people think. And what you want to be like, you can very easily tell if you're not resting and recovering enough, because your body's going to start hurting and you'll start feeling injuries. And one of the very first things that you should do if you're doing a program and you start to feel old injuries coming up, or you start feeling aches and pains, the very first thing that you should do is have a look at your rest and recovery. Look at the way that you're training. Say, am I doing a high intensity workout and following it by another high intensity workout? That's bad. Don't do that. Always do one high intensity day followed by a lower intensity day. Am I getting enough sleep at night? Am I prioritizing 8 hours sleep? Am I getting, do I have a bedtime, and am I rising without an alarm? Like, is my body waking up naturally at the time that I relatively need to get up? Are you supplementing your training? Supplements are not something that you have to do, but if you're going to be really going for it and you're going to be training, 4, 5, 6 days a week, and you're going to be doing HIIT training, then I would absolutely recommend supplementing your diet with a good, whey protein supplement, probably creatine, some glutamine. I even have a green supplement, and there's other things that I take as well. So, I hope that's answered this question for you. I've got a couple of comments on YouTube, so I'll answer these. Fizzneck Freak has said, I came across your videos while researching rotator cuff and shoulder pain. I'm getting rotator cuff surgery on December the 30th, and now my 2025 goal is to take a step back and work to rebuild muscle while also focusing on flexibility, etc. I hope you're still listening to this, Fizz Freak, because I've got a little bit of advice for you here, and I'd like to know something. What muscle in the rotator cuff is torn, and is it a full thickness tear? So that means, if this is your supraspinatus, has it been completely torn and it's not connected, or is it a partial tear where it's partially torn the way through? Because if it is a partial tear, and this is not medical advice, I am not a medical professional, so take this the way that you want it, but I would personally never get surgery for a partial thickness tear. Partial thickness tears can and most likely will repair and make a full recovery with good strength and conditioning training. A full thickness tear is completely different. A full thickness tear will need to be reconnected via surgical intervention, and that's a different story. So I'd love, if you're still on the stream, I'd love to know, is it a full thickness tear or is it a partial thickness tear? And unfortunately, a lot of people jump to surgery too soon, and for a surgeon, for a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And for a lot of surgeons, any injury looks like a reason to get surgery. From somebody like my perspective, who's dealt with somebody like me, who's a coach, is very passionate about my training and very passionate about being able to perform optimally as I age, I've learned, Maren, who is a GP. Thank you for chiming in, Maren. I'm really happy to hear what you've said here, because Maren is a practicing GP and she's just jumped on and said, I agree. Because surgery is always an option. I've had surgery. I tore my Lisfranc ligament, which is probably the biggest ligament in the foot. If you look at your foot, if you imagine that you guys are looking at my foot from the bottom, okay, and this is my little toe and this is my big toe here. I know I could just do it with my thumb, but this is going to illustrate it better. So if that's your foot, and if your toes end here, the foot is actually still, it looks like a finger under an x-ray. There are all these individual bones, but even though the skin ends there. On the big toe up here is the Lisfranc ligament. It's what holds the big toe onto the rest of the foot. And when you look down at your foot, it's the highest point of the foot. It's the apex of the foot. And it's the point where when you strike the ground, all of the force that you hit goes into that Lisfranc ligament. And so I tore it doing acrobatics when I was 20 years old, and it was a complete tear. I'll never forget this. It made this God almighty tearing sound when I landed. It sounded like somebody was tearing jeans, like tearing denim. It went like that. It was horrible. And I hit the ground and I immediately went into shock. Like I was just pumped with adrenaline, couldn't feel any pain. And my mate, who was sitting probably about 10 meters away from me in the park, I looked up at him and I said, "Did you hear that?" And he just looked at me. He looked at me like he'd seen a ghost, and he went like that. And I had no idea what had happened. And I stood up and tried to walk. And as I put pressure on that foot, my big toe went like that. It just came right up and my body just fell over. You know how they say you can't walk with your big toe? I found that out firsthand, and it freaked the hell out of me. And about 5 minutes later, the adrenaline wore off and I was in so much pain. My body was like shivering, and it was brutal. And here's an example of, I just answered a question to somebody saying, I went to a doctor, and Marin, I hope you don't take this the wrong way because I'm making a blanket statement, and there's good doctors and there's not so good doctors. But this was my experience with a doctor. I went to a doctor first, and I said, "Oh, this happened. Can you tell me what's happened?" And he looked down at my foot and he said, "Oh, you've just bruised one of the blood vessels," because there was purple, color and everything in there, a massive bruising. And he said, "Oh, you've torn a blood vessel and bruised your foot. Just let it rest for a few weeks." And I went, okay. So I went to another doctor, and he told me to go and see a sports doctor. And the sports doctor gave me an X-ray, and he got the result from the X-ray straight away. He had a look at it. And he sat me down and he said, "I'm sorry to tell you, this is a lot more serious than a torn blood vessel. It looks like you've torn a Lisfranc ligament." And he explained to me what that was. And he said, "You're going to have to go and get a CT scan so that we can confirm this." And so this is the importance of getting proper diagnosis. Proper diagnosis is so important, because imagine I listened to that first doctor and just tried to rest it. And I was so anti-surgery. I did not want to go in for surgery. And I went to multiple different people. I went to different physical therapists and everything. And they all just said to me, "Look, man, they actually said to me, it was interesting. They said, "You're actually fortunate that the ligament has fully torn," because what happens with ligaments is that ligaments have no elasticity to them. They're not designed to be elastic at all. Like muscles are elastic and tendons are somewhat elastic, but ligaments are rock solid. They are designed to just hold bones like right where they're meant to be. And they said it's actually worse with a Lisfranc tear if you stretch the ligament, because if you stretch the ligament, we can't really repair it the same way that we can with a full thickness tear. So they said, "You're actually lucky, but what we need to do is you need to get a bolt put in your foot so it holds it in place, and then the ligament will regrow and it will repair. And then depending on how successful the surgery is and your recovery is, we can remove the bolt or we can leave it in." And fortunately for me, this was a work injury. I did it. I was a performer at the time. I was a stuntman, and so I was covered, and I was covered in the private medical system. And I got to choose my surgeon, and I went with a surgeon who was one of the top orthopedic surgeons in Australia at the time, because this is going back 26 years now. I'm not sure if he's still practicing. And he was the surgeon for the Sydney Swans, which is one of the elite football clubs in Australia. And when I went back for my first check-in 12 weeks later, and he did a few assessments on me, he asked me how many times I'd been to physio. And I said, I actually only went once. I didn't really like what they were giving me, and I thought that I could, do a better job myself, and I was doing my own physio on it. And he said, off the record, I would advise you not to go to physio again, because I've never seen a physical therapist in Australia, they're called physiotherapists, get the kind of results that you're getting with yourself. In my 14 years of being an orthopedic surgeon, I've never seen somebody recover as quickly from this injury as you have. Actually, that was at 6 weeks. I remember this now. And he said, I would actually take the screw out of your foot now, but I can't because of litigation. For insurance purposes, you have to have the screw in your foot for at least 12 weeks, or else you can sue me for malpractice. So I had to leave it in for 12 weeks, and he took the screw out after 12 weeks. And every time I went and checked in with him and he was assessing me and looking what I could do, he said, I've never seen anybody have a recovery like this. So fortunately for me, I had what he called a miracle recovery. Anyway, the reason I told that story is because I have had surgery. I've had surgery for a sports injury. So I am not somebody that goes, never, ever, ever get surgery. There's no place for it. But you want to be damn sure that that's what you need to do, because you will never be able to undo surgery. You can never get the surgery and then 6 months later go, oh, that didn't work very well. Can I just get that undone? You can't do that. My brother Yanni had surgery on his knee. He tore his ACL, the anterior cruciate ligament, and they took a part of his hamstring out and regrafted a new ACL. And he now wishes that he didn't get the surgery, because there's been new studies done on professional soccer players over in the Premier League over in, I think it's England or the UK or wherever that is. I'm not over my European soccer sporting codes that well. And they've done, I've heard about this study many, many times. I can't quote to you which study it is, but I've heard my physical therapist friends talk to me about it many times. And they had the ACL tears, anterior cruciate ligament tears, very common in soccer players. That's how my brother did it. My brother tore it playing soccer, or football, you guys call it over in Europe. And what they did a study where they got 3 groups of professional soccer players, and they put them, so the first group got the surgery and were told that they got the surgery. The second group had the incisions put on their leg and, the stitches and everything, so that when they came out of the general anesthetic, they looked down, it made it look like they had the surgery, but they hadn't had the surgery, but they were told that they'd had the surgery. And then the third group had the same thing, the incisions made, no surgery, but they were told that they hadn't had the surgery. They said, look, we just put the incisions there, but we actually didn't give you the surgery. Guess which group had the greatest rate of recovery and return to sports? Drum roll, please. It was the second group. It was the placebo group. It was the group that didn't have the surgery, but thought that they'd had the surgery. Isn't that incredible? So it was more powerful to think that you'd had the surgery, but to actually have had nothing done than to get the ACL repaired. And now, apparently, over in professional football players, when guys tear their ACLs, they actually don't repair them. They don't do anything to it. They let them recover, and they let them finish out their career without an ACL, basically without an anterior cruciate ligament. Anyway, so that's just a funny sort of anecdotal story with this. But anyway, I'm saying all of this because you're obviously not on the live stream anymore, Fizzneck Freak, because you haven't responded. But look, man, if you've got a partial thickness tear in any of your rotator cuff muscles, I would go all in on recovery, on rehab for my shoulder, and I would do that for a minimum of 12 weeks. I would really go all in on rehab and assess if you've made any progress, get another set of scans done, see if you're progressing, see if the tear is repairing on its own, and then make your decision as to whether or not you want to get surgery or not. And you could even at that point, you could say, well, I'm making progress. I'm not sure if I'm going to get the surgery or not. I'm going to keep on this path for another 3 months, and then I'll assess again. And you might decide 6 months, 12 months later, you might decide, oh, you know what, I'm going to get this surgery. I haven't been able to repair it and recover from it. But I have personally been able to rehab rotator cuff tears in both shoulders. In one shoulder, it was a subscapularis tear, which is the most common rotator cuff tear. And in the other shoulder, it was a teres minor tear, I think. And they were both with my slap tears. And I've been able to rehabilitate both of them. And it was funny for me because those tears were like secondary to the slap tear. The slap tear is a way worse injury to have. So I was just focusing on rehabilitating my slap tear, and in the process, the rotator cuff tears took care of themselves. So there you go. Anyway, I've gone way off topic for what the discussion of this live stream was, but I hope I've helped you guys. I hope I've given you some good information. I hope that I've empowered you to be able to direct your training, either with doing the way that you program structural balance training for yourself, or the way that you incorporate HIIT workouts into your training. And also for those of you that were listening to the end of this, where I was talking about, when you should or shouldn't consider getting surgery and who you should go to get a diagnosis. And I strongly recommend for anybody who has an injury, who it's really stopping them from being able to do the things that they want to do, do not go and see a surgeon straight away. Don't go doctor, referral, surgeon. I wouldn't do that. I would go doctor, referral, physical therapist. Go and see a good sports physical therapist, and maybe even see 2 or 3 of them, because they're not all as good as each other. And with a good physical therapist, if you go to a couple of them, you'll have a really good understanding of the diagnosis of what the injury is, and they'll be able to tell you with a much more likely certainty as to whether it is possible to rehabilitate this injury without surgery, or whether you do need to go and see a surgeon. And if you see a couple of physical therapists, of sports physical therapists who have got a real interest in sports and who have got a history of working with athletes, and they suggest surgery, then go and see a surgeon. And otherwise, if they say, look, rehabilitation can fix this, once you've got a diagnosis for that injury, that's when somebody like me can really help you. And so if that's you, if you need to rehabilitate an injury, if you've got an injury that has been diagnosed, or if you just want your programming trained for you for structural balance training or for HIIT training or for whatever your goals are, you can come and join the UMS online coaching. Go to unitygym.com. And if you've made it this far, if you like my content, if you're enjoying this stuff, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Go follow us on X, follow us wherever you are. Tell your friends, hit the like button, do all that stuff. And it's Friday today, so I'm signing off for the week. I am going to be building out a bit of content strategy for the next foreseeable future around structural balance. I'm going to go really deep on how you do structural balance training for each joint in the body. I've already had Stephen Lake asked for talking about structural balance specifically for the hip, so I'll talk about that stuff. And then after I've talked a lot about structural balance training, I'll start talking about more advanced methods of training. Talking about using overload methods for building muscle, using overload methods for building max strength and things like that. So some good stuff coming up. I'll see you guys next week. Thanks so much for joining me. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody.